What's an old black woman like you doing with all this drug money? Officer Derek Lawson's voice boomed across the Detroit National Bank parking lot. Every passerby stopped and stared at elderly Evelyn Hayes. Lawson snatched the white envelope from her trembling hands, tearing it open with violent force. $3,200 in crisp bills spilled onto the asphalt. "Officer, please." "That's my husband's pension. I have the withdrawal slip." Evelyn's voice broke as she reached for her scattered life savings. Lawson's boot slammed down on her arthritic hand as she bent toward the money. "Don't you dare touch evidence, Grandma." He scooped up every bill while she cradled her throbbing fingers. The crowd watched in stunned silence as he stuffed her entire life savings into his jacket pocket. "Dirty money belongs with the law," he sneered, towering over the crying elderly woman. "Maybe next time you'll think twice about dealing drugs." Have you ever watched a predator destroy an innocent life in broad daylight? Evelyn Hayes had lived in this neighborhood for many years. She and her husband Walter bought their modest two-story house back when the streets were lined with working families who looked out for each other. The house held decades of memories. Walter's workshop in the basement where he repaired neighbors' bicycles for free. The kitchen where Evelyn baked cookies for every child on the block. The front porch where they watched sunsets and planned their retirement dreams. Now elderly, she was one of the last original residents. The gentrification wave had swept through like a tide, bringing young professionals who complained about suspicious activity whenever they saw longtime black residents going about their daily lives. New residents called the police if children played too loudly, if elderly people sat on their porches too long, if anyone who didn't look like them walked down their streets. The community that once felt like family had become hostile territory. The money Lawson had stolen represented everything to Evelyn. Walter's pension from decades driving city buses through rain, snow, and scorching heat. Every dollar saved since his death. Money earned through dignity, hard work, and sacrifice. Her only hope of fixing the roof before winter storms turned her home into a ruin was now crumpled in a corrupt cop's pocket. She had been Detroit Elementary's principal for many years. Hundreds of children had passed through her office, some for awards, others needing guidance. Parents trusted her with their most precious gifts. The community respected her wisdom and dedication. Teachers sought her advice on difficult students. Parents confided their family struggles. Children ran to hug her in grocery stores years after graduation. She had shaped young minds and built futures with patience and love. But respect meant nothing to Officer Derek Lawson. Lawson was a veteran of the Detroit Police Department. His personnel file, hidden from public view, contained 17 complaints: excessive force against teenagers, racial profiling during traffic stops, theft of personal property during searches, all dismissed by his superiors. His protection came from Sergeant Frank Delgado, a veteran who shared Lawson's views about keeping certain people in line. Together, they had perfected a system of legal theft disguised as law enforcement. Delgado had taught Lawson the tricks: target elderly victims who couldn't fight back, choose immigrants afraid of deportation, pick people whose complaints would be ignored by the system, always file paperwork showing smaller amounts than actually seized. Civil asset forfeiture was their weapon of choice. The law allowed police to seize money and property suspected of being connected to crimes. No arrest required, no charges filed, no conviction needed, just suspicion and a badge. The process to reclaim seized assets was deliberately complex. Expensive lawyers, multiple court appearances, months of bureaucratic delays. Most victims simply gave up, which was exactly what the system intended. Lawson's recent divorce had drained his bank account. His ex-wife took the house, the savings, and most of his dignity. His gambling debts to local bookies were mounting daily. Loan sharks didn't care about police badges when payment was overdue. Targeting elderly residents in gentrifying neighborhoods had become his personal ATM. Old people carried cash. They were isolated. They rarely fought back effectively. Perfect victims for a predator with legal authority. The $3,000 burning in his pocket would solve his immediate problems. He had logged only $200 in evidence, splitting the rest with Delgado as usual. It was a perfect crime protected by qualified immunity and departmental brotherhood. But Lawson had made a fatal mistake. He had chosen the wrong victim. Evelyn stumbled home, her hand still throbbing from Lawson's boot. Blood seeped through the skin where his heel had ground into her arthritic knuckles. Every step sent pain shooting up her arm. Her neighbor, Mrs. Green, rushed over from her garden where she had been watching the whole time. Evelyn, honey, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse than a ghost, Evelyn whispered. A devil with a badge. Mrs. Green helped her inside, bringing ice for the swelling. Other neighbors began gathering, their faces grim with shared outrage. This was their community matriarch, their children's former principal, the woman who organized food drives and holiday celebrations. Inside her kitchen, Evelyn's hands shook as she dialed her son's number. She rarely called Jonathan at work, knowing how busy his government job kept him. But she needed to hear a familiar voice after such trauma. Hey, Mom, everything okay? Baby, I hate to bother you, but something terrible happened today. Jonathan's voice immediately shifted. Years of training had taught him to recognize genuine distress in a victim's voice. Mom, what's wrong? Are you hurt? A police officer. He took Walter's pension money, all of it, $3,200. He called me terrible names. He stepped on my hand when I tried to get the money back. The silence stretched long enough for Evelyn to worry the call had dropped. Mom, don't say another word over the phone. I'm handling this. But Jonathan, I don't think there's anything anyone can do. He's a police officer. Who's going to believe an old black woman over... Trust me, I'll call you back tonight. Stay inside. Don't talk to any more police until I get there. Evelyn hung up, confused by her son's intensity and strange instructions. Jonathan worked in government security, but she had never quite understood what that meant. He traveled frequently, spoke carefully about his job, and always seemed to carry invisible weight on his shoulders. What she didn't know was that Jonathan Hayes held the title of Assistant Director for Criminal Investigation at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. His division specialized in civil rights violations and police corruption across the entire United States. For some time, his team had been building a case against the Detroit Police Department. Anonymous tips had flooded in from elderly residents and immigrants. Stories of stolen money, planted evidence, and systematic harassment targeting the most vulnerable community members. They had surveillance footage, financial records, victim testimonies, but they needed one case with ironclad evidence and a sympathetic victim willing to testify. Lawson had just handed them both. Lawson sat in his patrol car outside Evelyn's house filling out paperwork with practiced deception. Under amount seized, he wrote $200. Under suspected crime, he scrolled drug trafficking cash transaction consistent with narcotic sales. The remaining $3,000 sat in a manila envelope on his passenger seat, waiting to be divided with Delgado. They had done this dance 17 times recently, each theft documented as a smaller amount, each victim left with no recourse and no hope. He walked to Evelyn's front door and rang the bell, enjoying the power he held over her life. When she answered, her eyes were red from crying. Here's your receipt, ma'am. Lawson held out a carbon copy for him. $200 seized pending investigation. Evelyn's voice cracked. But you took over $3,000. Are you calling me a liar? Lawson's hand moved to his weapon. Filing a false police report is a serious crime. She stared at the receipt. $200. Her entire life savings reduced to pocket change on an official document that would protect him and destroy her. When will I get my money back? Lawson laughed. Well, that depends on our investigation. Could take months, could take years, might never happen if we find evidence of criminal activity. What evidence? I'm a retired school principal. Drug dealers come in all shapes and sizes, Grandma. You'd be surprised how many teachers supplement their income with illegal activities. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Decades of dedicated service to children, a spotless record, community respect built over time, all reduced to cruel insinuation by a corrupt cop. I need that money for my roof, Evelyn pleaded. It's leaking badly. Winter is coming. I should have thought about that before getting involved with drugs. Lawson tucked the receipt into her mailbox. Have a blessed day. Word spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Mrs. Green called her sister called the church called community leaders. By evening, half the block knew that Officer Lawson had robbed their beloved former principal. 3 neighbors came forward with similar stories. Linda Ramirez, elderly, had lost her grocery money to Lawson last month. He claimed her food stamps were suspicious. George Ellis, elderly, lost $800 during a routine traffic stop. Lawson said his cash smelled like marijuana. All had received receipts for much smaller amounts. All had been threatened when they questioned the discrepancies. All had been told their cases were under investigation with no timeline for resolution. The pattern was clear. but the system protected Lawson at every turn. Evelyn tried calling the police department's internal affairs division. The desk sergeant told her complaints had to be filed in person. When she arrived the next morning, they said the complaint officer was unavailable. When she returned that afternoon, they claimed the computers were down. On her third visit, Sergeant Delgado himself handled her complaint. He listened with fake sympathy, typing slowly on his keyboard. "So you're claiming Officer Lawson took more money than what's documented?" "Yes, sir. $3,200, not $200. Delgado shook his head sadly. "Ma'am, that's a very serious accusation. Are you sure you're remembering correctly? Sometimes trauma can affect memory." "I counted that money 3 times at the bank. I have the withdrawal slip." "Bank records show you withdrew $3,000, but that doesn't prove you still had it when Officer Lawson encountered you." Delgado leaned back in his chair. "Could you have spent some of it? Given it to someone? Drug dealers often use elderly people as couriers." There it was again. The drug dealer accusation designed to discredit her before she could even file a proper complaint. "I want to file an official complaint anyway." Delgado sighed and handed her a thick packet of forms. "Fill these out completely. Any missing information will invalidate your complaint. We'll need documentation for every dollar you claim was taken, bank statements, receipts, witness testimony from people who saw the money." The forms were deliberately complex, pages of legal language designed to confuse and intimidate elderly complainants. Questions about her mental health history, her criminal background, her family's finances. By the time Evelyn finished the paperwork, Delgado's shift had ended. The night desk sergeant said complaints could only be processed during business hours. She would have to return tomorrow. That night, her ceiling leaked worse than ever. Rain poured through multiple holes, soaking her living room carpet and damaging family photos. The temperature dropped sharply, turning her house into an icebox. She called her insurance company. They said roof damage from neglected maintenance wasn't covered. She called contractors for estimates. The cheapest quote was thousands of dollars, money she no longer had thanks to Lawson's theft. Evelyn sat in her cold, wet house surrounded by buckets catching drips and made the hardest phone call of her life. "Jonathan, baby, I don't think I can fight this anymore." Jonathan's voice turned ice cold. "Mom, pack a bag. Stay at Mrs. Green's tonight. Don't answer your door for anyone." "But Jonathan, this is my home. Just trust me. And Mom, don't throw away any documents. Keep everything." Within hours, federal surveillance teams were positioned around Evelyn's neighborhood. Unmarked vans monitored Lawson's radio communications. Financial investigators tracked every dollar flowing through his bank accounts. Digital forensic specialists began pulling phone records and text messages. But Evelyn knew none of this. She only knew that the next morning brought fresh horror. Lawson's patrol car was parked outside her house when she returned from Mrs. Green's. He stood on her front porch, writing parking tickets and placing them under her car's windshield wipers. "Morning. Ma'am, just documenting some violations I noticed." He had written her tickets for parking too close to a fire hydrant, expired registration, and blocking a driveway. All false. Her car sat legally in her own driveway, registered and inspected properly. "These tickets are wrong. I'm parked in my own driveway." Lawson's smile was predatory. "City ordinance requires vehicles to be parked at least 3 feet from property lines. Looks like you're in violation." He measured with his hands, making an obvious show of counting imaginary feet. "That's not a real law." "Are you questioning my knowledge of city ordinances?" His hand moved to his handcuffs. "Because obstruction of justice is a serious charge." Each ticket carried a $50 fine, $200 in fabricated violations, money she didn't have because he had stolen her savings. This was just the beginning. In the following days, Lawson escalated his campaign of harassment with methodical cruelty. Every morning brought new tickets, noise violations for her television being too loud, littering charges for leaves that blew from her yard, property maintenance citations for peeling paint that had been there for years. The city code enforcement officer Larry Bennett arrived one morning with a clipboard full of violations. He had worked for the city for many years and had never bothered Evelyn before. "Ma'am, we've received complaints about your property. Broken front step, damaged gutters, overgrown vegetation." Evelyn stared at her neat, well-maintained yard. "What overgrown vegetation?" Bennett pointed to a rose bush Walter had planted years ago. "City ordinance requires vegetation to be maintained below 4 feet in height." "That rose bush has been there for decades. Nobody ever complained before. Well, someone's complaining now. Bennett handed her a citation. You have a short time to correct these violations or face daily fines of $100. The violations were expensive to fix. Professional landscaping, roof repairs, concrete work, thousands of dollars she no longer had because of Lawson's theft. It was a perfect trap. Create violations that require money to fix, steal the victim's money so they couldn't afford repairs, then pile on daily fines until they lost their home entirely. That evening, Evelyn's water was shut off without warning. The utility company claimed she had unpaid bills dating back some time, but Evelyn had always paid her bills on time. Her checkbook showed every payment properly recorded and deposited. When she called to dispute the shutoff, she was transferred between departments for hours. Each representative asked her to verify account information she had already provided. Each promised to investigate and call back. None did. She spent the night without running water, washing dishes with bottled water and rainwater collected in buckets from her leaking roof. Mrs. Green brought her gallons of drinking water and helped her contact a lawyer. The consultation fee was $300. The lawyer listened sympathetically, but delivered devastating news. Civil asset forfeiture cases are extremely difficult to win. Police departments have legal immunity for good faith seizures. The burden of proof is on you to demonstrate the money wasn't connected to criminal activity. But I have bank records showing where the money came from. That proves you had legitimate income. It doesn't prove you still had that specific money when it was seized. Officer Lawson's report says he only took $200 in suspected drug proceeds. The lawyer's fees for fighting the case would start at $10,000 with no guarantee of success. Even if she won, it could take years. Meanwhile, the harassment would continue and her house would deteriorate beyond repair. The next day brought the cruelest blow yet. Lawson arrived with a television news crew from the local Channel 5. The reporter, Emily Harper, had been told police were conducting a major drug investigation in a residential neighborhood. This is Emily Harper reporting live from Detroit, where police are investigating alleged drug trafficking in what residents thought was a quiet family neighborhood. Lawson positioned himself prominently in the camera frame, speaking with practiced authority. We've had multiple reports of suspicious cash transactions at this address, large amounts of money changing hands, vehicles coming and going at unusual hours. The camera panned to Evelyn's house while Lawson continued his fabricated narrative. Every detail was a lie, but it sounded convincing on television. Drug traffickers often use elderly residents as fronts for their operations. They seem harmless, but appearances can be deceiving. Neighbors gathered to watch the spectacle. Some defended Evelyn loudly, but others whispered among themselves. Television news made everything seem official and credible. Evelyn watched from Mrs. Green's window as her reputation was destroyed on live television. Decades of community service erased by one corrupt cop's lies. The news story aired that evening during prime time. Channel 5's Facebook page filled with angry comments about drug dealers hiding in residential neighborhoods. Most commenters didn't know Evelyn personally, but they demanded action against anyone threatening their community safety. By the following day, someone had spray-painted "drug dealer" on her garage door in red letters 3 feet tall. Her mailbox was knocked over. Trash was scattered across her yard. Parents who once trusted her with their children now crossed the street to avoid her. Grocery store clerks watched her suspiciously. The pharmacist asked extra questions about her prescription medications. The isolation was devastating. She had lived in this community for nearly 5 decades. These were her neighbors, her friends, her extended family. Now they looked at her with suspicion and fear, but unknown to everyone, federal agents were documenting every illegal act. They recorded Lawson's false testimony to the news crew. They photographed the fabricated parking tickets. They traced the city water department's shutoff order back to a phone call from the police station. They had surveillance footage of Lawson and Delgado celebrating at O'Malley's pub, spending Evelyn's money on expensive whiskey and laughing about their latest victim. "Stupid old lady thought she could fight back," Lawson had bragged to the bartender. "I could take her house next if I wanted. Who's gonna stop me?" The bartender, unknowingly an off-duty federal agent working part-time to monitor police corruption. Every word was recorded. Every crime was documented. Every violation of Evelyn's civil rights was carefully cataloged by investigators who specialized in bringing down corrupt officials. Jonathan checked in with his mother daily, his heart breaking at the pain in her voice. but he couldn't reveal the investigation without compromising the case. He could only offer comfort and promise that justice would come. "Baby, I don't know how much more I can take," Evelyn whispered during one call. "My neighbors think I'm a criminal. My house is falling apart. I'm afraid to leave my own home." "Mom, I know this is hard, but I need you to hold on just a little longer. Can you do that for me?" "I'll try, sweetheart. I'll try." What Evelyn didn't know was that federal prosecutors were already preparing arrest warrants. What Lawson didn't know was that every move he made was being recorded by the most sophisticated law enforcement agency in the world. The trap was set. The evidence was overwhelming, and the reckoning was about to begin. One morning arrived with devastating news. Lawson stood on Evelyn's front porch holding official court documents and wearing his most triumphant smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes. I have some paperwork for you." Evelyn opened the door with trembling hands, her arthritis worse from stress and the cold dampness of her leaking house. "What is it now?" "Asset forfeiture proceedings. The city is seizing your house under the Comprehensive Crime Control Act. Property used in furtherance of drug trafficking becomes government property." The legal papers were thick and intimidating, filled with whereas clauses and legal terminology designed to confuse elderly victims, but the message was clear. She had a short time to vacate the premises. "This is insane. I've never sold drugs in my life." Lawson shrugged with mock sympathy. "Pattern of cash transactions, multiple complaints from neighbors, evidence of ongoing criminal enterprise. The law is the law, Grandma." "What complaints? What neighbors?" "Anonymous tips. Very credible sources concerned about criminal activity in their neighborhood. It was all fabricated. Lawson had filed the complaints himself using fake names and addresses. The system rarely verified anonymous tips, especially when they came from police officers. You have until the day after tomorrow morning to remove your personal belongings. Anything left behind becomes city property." Evelyn stared at the papers, seeing her many years' home disappearing into legal quicksand. The house where she had raised Jonathan, where she and Walter had built their life together, where decades of memories lived in every room. "I'm calling my son." "Call whoever you want. Federal courts don't interfere with local asset forfeiture cases, and your son can't help you now, can he? What's he going to do, file a complaint?" Lawson laughed cruelly. "By the time any lawyer gets involved, you'll be living under a bridge. Homeless old drug dealers don't get much sympathy from judges." The words cut deep, but Evelyn maintained her dignity. She walked to her phone with steady steps, refusing to let him see her break. Lawson walked away whistling, already planning how to profit from selling her house to developers. The gentrification boom made older homes valuable. This theft would net him more money than all his previous crimes combined. He called Delgado from his patrol car. "It's done. The old lady will be out by the day after tomorrow. The house should sell for at least $200,000. "Beautiful. Split it 50-50 as usual." "Absolutely. Easiest money we've ever made." They had no idea that every word was being recorded by federal surveillance equipment. Evelyn called Jonathan with shaking fingers, barely able to speak through her tears. "Baby, they're taking the house. I have 2 days to get out. Many years and they're just taking it all away." Jonathan's voice was steady, controlled, but she could hear steel underneath. "Mom, pack 1 bag with essentials. Stay at Mrs. Green's tonight. Tomorrow morning I want you to sit on your front porch at the agreed time." "Jonathan, there's nothing anyone can do. He said federal courts don't get involved in local cases." "Trust me, Mom. Just be on your porch at the agreed time. Don't go inside. Don't talk to any police officers. Just sit there and wait." "Wait for what?" "Justice." That evening, Jonathan made his final preparations. He called FBI Director Emily Thompson personally. "Ma'am, we're ready to execute the arrest tomorrow morning. We have 47 victims willing to testify. Financial evidence of over $200,000 in stolen assets, video and audio recordings of the crimes and the civil rights violations, crystal clear color of law violations, conspiracy under federal RICO statutes. These officers have been running a criminal enterprise under police protection. Do it. And Jonathan, I'm sorry about your mother. Thank you, ma'am. She taught me what justice really means." That night, Evelyn barely slept. She packed her most precious belongings into 2 suitcases, photos of Walter, her teaching awards, Jonathan's childhood drawings, a lifetime reduced to what she could carry. Mrs. Green helped her prepare, both women crying as they folded clothes and wrapped fragile memories in the newspaper. "Many years," Evelyn whispered. Everything Walter and I worked for, gone. Maybe your son can help. He works for the government, right? He does something with security, but what can one person do against the whole police department? Mrs. Green hugged her tightly. Sometimes one person is all it takes. Honey, you raised that boy right. I have faith he'll find a way. That morning came gray and cold. At the agreed time, Evelyn sat on her front porch wearing her best dress and holding her purse in her lap. She looked dignified despite everything that had been taken from her. Lawson arrived early, bringing a city towing truck and several police officers to oversee the eviction. He had also called the local news, wanting to document his victory over the drug dealer who had terrorized the neighborhood. Emily Harper set up her camera across the street, preparing to film the eviction of an elderly drug suspect. It would make compelling television for the evening news. "Good morning, Mrs. Hayes," Lawson called out cheerfully. "Ready to vacate the premises?" Evelyn sat quietly, her hands folded, looking down the street as if waiting for something. "I said, are you ready to leave?" Lawson's voice turned sharper. "Because I have a court order, and I will have you arrested for trespassing on city property." Still, Evelyn remained silent, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Lawson walked closer, his voice turning menacing. "Hey, I'm talking to you, drug dealer. You think ignoring me will save your house?" He leaned down until his face was inches from hers. "You're nothing. A worthless old woman who thought she could outsmart the system. Well, guess what? The system always wins." Then a distant engine sound grew louder. A black Suburban turned onto their street, followed by another, then another. A convoy of federal vehicles moving with precision and purpose. Lawson frowned, watching the approaching motorcade. What the hell? The vehicles stopped directly in front of Evelyn's house. Men in dark suits emerged, their movements coordinated and professional. FBI badges glinted in the morning sunlight. From the lead vehicle stepped a tall, imposing black man in an expensive suit. His presence commanded immediate attention and respect. Lawson stepped forward aggressively. "Excuse me, this is a local police matter. You need to move your vehicles." The man walked directly to Lawson, stopping inches from his face. "Officer Lawson, I'm Assistant Director Jonathan Hayes, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Criminal Investigative Division." Lawson's confidence flickered. Your name is Hayes. You've been stealing from my mother." The words hit like lightning. Lawson's eyes darted to Evelyn, then back to Jonathan, his mind struggling to process the connection. "Your mother? This is some kind of mistake." Evelyn stood up slowly, her voice clear and strong for the first time in weeks. "Jonathan, baby, this is the officer I told you about." Jonathan's voice carried the weight of federal authority. "Officer Derek Lawson, you are under arrest for violations of Title 18, Section 242 of the United States Code, deprivation of rights under color of law." Federal agents moved like a choreographed dance. Lawson's hands were cuffed behind his back before he could react. His weapon was secured. His radio was confiscated. "This is crazy. I was just doing my job." Jonathan stepped closer, his voice deadly calm. "Your job was to protect and serve. Instead, you terrorized an elderly retired school principal. You stole her life savings. You falsified police reports. You violated her constitutional rights under color of law." The television crew captured everything, but now they were filming Lawson's arrest instead of Evelyn's eviction. Delgado emerged from his patrol car, rushing to defend his partner. "Agent Hayes, there's been a misunderstanding. Officer Lawson was conducting a legitimate investigation." "Sergeant Delgado." Jonathan didn't turn around. "You're also under arrest. Same charges plus conspiracy and obstruction of justice." Two more agents moved to arrest Delgado while he sputtered protests about departmental procedures and proper jurisdiction. Captain Susan Reynolds arrived just as Delgado was being handcuffed. "What's the meaning of this? I demand to speak with your supervisor." Jonathan turned his full attention to her. "Captain Reynolds, you're under arrest for operating a criminal enterprise under color of law. You've systematically covered up civil rights violations and shared in the proceeds of theft. You can't arrest me. I'm a police captain." "Ma'am, I've arrested governors, federal judges, and police commissioners. Your rank means nothing when you violate federal law." The crowd of neighbors had grown larger, drawn by the federal convoy and television cameras. Many looked shocked and ashamed at how quickly they had believed Lawson's lies about their beloved former principal. Jonathan walked to his mother, helping her stand with gentle hands. I'm sorry this took so long, Mom. How did you? I don't understand. I've been investigating police corruption for many years. When you called that first day, you gave me the case I needed to bring them all down. He gestured to the federal agents now searching Lawson's patrol car. We've been watching them for some time, recording their conversations, tracking their bank accounts, documenting every crime. From the patrol car, agents retrieved the manila envelope containing the remainder of Evelyn's money, $3,000, exactly as she had described. Jonathan held up the envelope for the television cameras. Officer Lawson stole $3,200 from my mother. He logged $200 in evidence and kept the rest. This is the money he claimed didn't exist. Mrs. Green rushed over to hug Evelyn. "Oh, honey, I knew you were telling the truth. I just knew it." Other neighbors began approaching, offering apologies and support. The community that had abandoned her was rallying back to her side. Jonathan continued addressing the cameras, his voice carrying the authority of the federal government. For some time, the FBI has been investigating systematic civil rights violations by members of the Detroit Police Department. We have documented 47 cases of theft, harassment, and abuse targeting elderly residents and minorities. He handed his mother the envelope containing her money. Today's arrests are just the beginning. We will prosecute every officer who participated in this criminal enterprise. Lawson, now sitting in the back of a federal vehicle, stared at Evelyn with pure hatred. "You have no idea what you've done, old woman." Jonathan leaned down to Lawson's window. "Actually, she knows exactly what she's done. She helped expose a corrupt police department and protected 46 other victims." The asset forfeiture papers were immediately voided by federal order. The fabricated tickets were dismissed. The fake violations were expunged from city records. As Lawson and Delgado were driven away in federal custody, Evelyn finally understood why her son had been so secretive about his work. "You're really an FBI director." Jonathan smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him in years. "Assistant director, Mom. I got into law enforcement because I watched you stand up for what's right every single day." Within hours of the arrests, the transformation began. FBI forensic accountants traced every stolen dollar through Lawson's and Delgado's bank accounts. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Lawson had deposited irregular cash amounts totaling $43,000 over some time. Delgado had similar deposits. Captain Reynolds had received monthly payments disguised as overtime compensation. Jonathan personally returned to his mother's house that afternoon, bringing a team of federal agents who had become impromptu moving helpers. They carried Evelyn's belongings back inside while she watched in amazement. "Baby, I still can't believe this is real." "It's real, Mom, and it's just beginning." Jonathan handed her an official document. "Federal court order invalidating all seizure proceedings against your property. Your house is legally protected from any future harassment or false claims." The roof repair crew arrived shortly after. Jonathan had called in favors with contractors who worked on federal buildings. Within a few days, Evelyn's house had a completely new roof, gutters, and weatherproofing. "I can't afford all this work, Jonathan. The city is paying for it, part of the federal settlement agreement." The Detroit City Council had called an emergency session the moment news of the FBI arrests hit television. Federal prosecutors had presented them with a choice: cooperate fully with reforms or face federal takeover of the entire police department. They chose cooperation. Mayor Angela Washington arrived at Evelyn's house the next morning with a formal apology and a large check. "Mrs. Hayes, on behalf of Detroit, I want to apologize for the horrific treatment you received. This should never have happened to anyone, especially not to someone who dedicated her life to serving our community." The settlement was substantial: $500,000 for civil rights violations, full reimbursement for property damage and legal fees, a formal letter of apology to be published in the city newspaper. But Evelyn wanted more than money. "What about the other victims? What about making sure this never happens again?" Mayor Washington nodded respectfully. "We're establishing a civilian oversight board with real authority to investigate police misconduct. Every officer will undergo civil rights training, and we're implementing body cameras for all interactions." Jonathan added, "The entire department is under federal consent decree for the next few years. Any violation will result in federal takeover." The neighborhood transformation was equally dramatic. Mrs. Green organized a welcome home celebration that drew over 200 people. Former students, now adults with children of their own, came to honor their beloved principal. George Ellis, the elderly man who had lost money to Lawson, approached Evelyn with tears in his eyes. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm so sorry I didn't speak up when you needed support. I was scared, but that's no excuse." "Mr. Ellis, we were all scared. That's how bullies control people. But we're not scared anymore." Linda Ramirez, the grandmother who had lost her grocery money, hugged Evelyn tightly. "You saved us all by being brave. My granddaughter wants to be just like you when she grows up." The local newspaper ran a front-page story about Evelyn's courage and Jonathan's investigation. The headline read, "Former Principal's Courage Exposes Police Corruption Ring." But the most meaningful recognition came from the school board. Superintendent Dr. William Ellis visited Evelyn personally. "Mrs. Hayes, we want to name the new community center after you, the Evelyn Hayes Center for Community Justice." "That's very kind, but I'm not sure I deserve." "You absolutely deserve it. You taught our children that standing up for what's right matters more than staying safe. That's the most important lesson anyone can learn." Jonathan took some time off to spend with his mother, something he hadn't done in years. They sat on the front porch in the evenings watching neighbors wave and children play in the streets. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you what I really did for work, Mom." "Baby, I always knew you were protecting people. I just never imagined you'd end up protecting me. You taught me everything I know about justice. Remember when I was a boy and those kids were picking on Sarah Martinez?" Evelyn smiled at the memory. "You came home with a black eye because you stood up for her, and you told me that sometimes doing the right thing costs us something, but it's always worth it." "I never thought those words would come back to save my own life." The federal investigation expanded rapidly. Jonathan's team had uncovered similar corruption in 12 other police departments across the state. Evelyn's case had provided the legal precedent and evidence patterns needed to launch a statewide civil rights investigation. Lawson and Delgado were held without bail pending trial. Their legal fees quickly drained their stolen savings. The properties they had purchased with crime proceeds were seized under federal asset forfeiture laws. Captain Reynolds faced the most serious charges. As the commanding officer, she had not only participated in the theft, but had systematically covered up complaints and protected criminal officers. All three would ultimately plead guilty to avoid longer sentences. Lawson received 8 years in federal prison. Delgado got 7 years. Reynolds was sentenced to 10 years and loss of her pension. The 47 victims identified by the FBI investigation received full restitution plus damages. The total recovery exceeded $800,000 in stolen assets and fraudulent seizures. But for Evelyn, the personal victories mattered most. Her water service was restored with a formal apology from the utility company. The fabricated parking tickets were expunged from city records. The false property violations were removed and the responsible code enforcement officer was terminated. Most importantly, her reputation was fully restored. The community that had briefly doubted her now rallied around her as a hero who had exposed systematic injustice. The spray-painted drug dealer graffiti on her garage was painted over by volunteer teenagers from her former school. In its place, they painted a beautiful mural showing hands of different colors joined together with the words, "Justice for All." Jonathan arranged for enhanced security around his mother's house, but it proved unnecessary. The neighborhood had become protective of their local hero. Parents used Evelyn's story to teach their children about courage and integrity. Local churches invited her to speak about standing up against injustice. Community colleges asked her to address criminal justice classes. Her quiet dignity and powerful story inspired audiences across the region. "I never wanted to be famous," she told Jonathan. "I just wanted my money back so I could fix my roof." Sometimes the smallest act of resistance becomes the biggest catalyst for change. Sometime after the arrests, Evelyn received a letter from the FBI director personally, thanking her for her courage in exposing corruption. The letter was accompanied by a civilian service award recognizing her contribution to civil rights enforcement. But the recognition that meant the most came from an unexpected source. A package arrived with no return address. Inside was a hand-drawn card from a child who had seen the news story. The crayon drawing showed a small figure standing up to a much larger figure wearing a police uniform. The message, written in careful block letters, read, "Thank you for being brave. You showed me that even kids can stand up to bullies." Later, Evelyn Hayes stood before a packed auditorium at Detroit Community College. Students, community leaders, and law enforcement officials had gathered to hear her speak about justice, courage, and the power of standing up for what's right. "I taught children for many years," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I always told them that America is built on the promise of justice for everyone. When that promise was broken for me, I almost lost faith." She paused, looking out at the diverse crowd hanging on her every word. "But my son reminded me that good people never give up, and sometimes help comes from places we never expect." The audience included Linda Ramirez, George Ellis, and 43 other victims who had received justice because of Evelyn's courage. Their presence validated every difficult moment of her fight. "I'm not a hero. I'm just a retired teacher who refused to accept injustice, but I learned something important. Corruption thrives when good people stay silent. Evil wins when we convince ourselves that we're powerless." Jonathan sat in the front row, beaming with pride as his mother addressed the crowd with the same authority she had once used to inspire students. "The system works, but only when people make it work. Local officials failed me, but federal law enforcement stepped in because that's what they're supposed to do. No one is above the law, especially those sworn to uphold it." She gestured to the reformed police officers in attendance, part of the new accountability measures implemented after the investigation. "I don't hate police officers. I hate corruption. Good officers deserve our support. Bad officers deserve prosecution. It's that simple." The statistics she shared were sobering but important. Civil asset forfeiture laws had enabled the seizure of billions annually, often without criminal charges. Elderly and minority communities faced disproportionate targeting. Federal oversight had increased successful prosecutions of corrupt officials significantly. But numbers don't tell the whole story. Behind every statistic is a person whose life was destroyed by abuse of power, a family whose savings were stolen, a community whose trust was broken. Evelyn's voice grew stronger as she reached her central message. "I want you to remember 3 things. First, if you witness injustice, speak up. Record everything. Document every interaction. Your voice matters even when it feels small." The audience leaned forward, absorbing every word. "Second, know your rights and help others know theirs. The Constitution protects all of us, but only if we understand and defend those protections." She looked directly at the young people in the crowd. "Third, when local systems fail, don't give up. Contact federal authorities. The FBI exists to protect civil rights for all Americans. Use that protection." Jonathan had arranged for the speech to be live-streamed, reaching thousands of viewers who needed to hear Evelyn's message of hope and empowerment. "My house is warm and dry now. My reputation is restored. My family is safe. But the real victory isn't personal. It's that 46 other families got justice too. It's that a corrupt system was exposed and reformed." She gestured to the young faces in the audience. "You are the future guardians of justice. When you see something wrong, make it right. When you see corruption, expose it. When you see someone being hurt, help them." The standing ovation lasted several minutes, but Evelyn wasn't finished. "I want to leave you with the words I used to tell my students every day. Your character is defined not by what you do when people are watching, but by what you do when you think no one will ever know." She smiled, remembering decades of young faces who had sat in similar auditoriums, absorbing lessons about integrity and courage. Someone is always watching: your conscience, your family, your community, and sometimes when justice seems impossible, the most powerful law enforcement agency in the world. The final applause was thunderous. Students rushed forward to shake her hand and ask questions. Community leaders requested her contact information for future speaking engagements. But Evelyn's attention was focused on Jonathan, who stood waiting with tears in his eyes. "You did good, Mom." "We did good, baby. We did good." As the crowd dispersed, Evelyn's message continued spreading through social media posts, news articles, and personal conversations. Her story became a rallying cry for justice and accountability. The live stream comments showed the impact of her words. "This woman is a hero, sharing everywhere. My grandmother went through something similar. Thank you for fighting back. Everyone needs to hear this story. Justice matters. Tag someone who stands up for what's right." The final statistic Evelyn shared resonated most powerfully. 1 in 3 Americans reported police misconduct in their communities, but less than 5% of cases resulted in officer prosecution. Federal intervention was essential for justice. Her closing words became a viral message of hope. Your voice matters. Your story matters. Justice matters. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. The evening news featured extensive coverage of her speech. Social media algorithms amplified her message to millions of viewers. Community organizations requested copies of her presentation for training purposes. But the most important audience was sitting in their living rooms watching an elderly black woman prove that courage and persistence could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Have you ever witnessed injustice and stayed silent? What would you do if it happened to someone you love? Share this story if you believe justice should be blind. Like if you support police accountability. Subscribe to Black Soul for more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Comment below. Have you ever seen corruption exposed? How did it change your community? Remember, sometimes the smallest voice creates the biggest. In the quiet streets of Detroit, an elderly woman named Evelyn Hayes faced a nightmare no one should ever endure. A corrupt police officer stole her late husband's hard-earned pension, crushed her hand under his boot, and tried to destroy her dignity with lies and harassment. Yet what could have broken her spirit instead revealed the incredible strength that lives inside ordinary people. Evelyn's pain, her tears, and her unwavering refusal to give up taught us one of life's most powerful lessons. True courage isn't loud or dramatic. It's the quiet decision to stand up for what's right even when the whole world seems against you. Her story reminds us that justice may be delayed, but it is never truly dead when good people refuse to stay silent. Behind every act of corruption stands the hope that someone, somewhere, will choose integrity over fear. Evelyn didn't just win back her home and her money. She helped expose an entire system of abuse and protected dozens of other vulnerable families. Her journey proves that even the smallest voice, raised at the right moment, can shake the foundations of injustice and bring real change. If Evelyn's story touched your heart, if it made you believe a little more in the power of courage and truth, then let it move you to action. Drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever witnessed injustice and wished you had spoken up? What would you do differently today? And if this message of hope and resilience inspired you, please hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join our community of voices who refuse to look away. Together, we can keep stories like Evelyn's alive and remind the world that justice still matters. Thank you for watching. Your support truly makes a difference. It says.